Welcome to the Taking Care of Tutu podcast. I'm your host, Meg Obanoff. Today we're excited to have Cindy Fowler from the Alzheimer's Association. Welcome, Cindy.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you inviting me today.
So, what's your job with the Alzheimer's Association? What's your title?
My title is the Program Manager for both Kauaʻi and Maui County.
Great. And how long have you been with them?
About 2.5 years now, I've been with the association. My background actually is in physical therapy, and I worked for a number of years with kūpuna basically in home health settings, a little bit in like skilled nursing facilities as well. So this was a population and a topic that was kind of near and dear to my heart. I think especially after working in home health, watching so many families dealing with either a new diagnosis or a change in condition, and then trying to negotiate and navigate how to deal with coming out of a hospitalization and coming back home, and now knowing maybe there's something new or different happening, and just all that dynamic that's involved with family and getting community resources involved.
Great. So, tell us about the different programs that the Alzheimer's Association offers.
Sure. Our Aloha chapter represents the state, and we're based out of Oahu, but we've got care and support people, myself that covers the 4 islands, Kauai, Maui, Molokai, and Lanai. And then I've got Nick, who is over on Big Island, and Gina, who covers Oahu. And we call ourselves the Care Bears. We oversee care and support for the organization. And so, really what we do is try and get out in the community to be able to help family caregivers with education, with awareness, with giving tips and skills. But we also do what we call awareness programs, where we go out into maybe smaller groups like Rotary clubs or church groups and give them a little bit of an understanding about what dementia is, talk with them a little bit about early warning signs, talk with them about what we're now learning about brain health and prevention, and then just giving them kind of an overview of what the association can do. We do one-on-one help with caregivers if they're having specific issues related to caregiving. We call those care consultations, and those consist of a, kind of like a mini session of sitting down, working through what the problem is, strategizing ways that we can help them, ways that tips, tricks that they can try themselves, and then an action plan where we check back in with them and just make sure, that they're kind of having a trajectory in the right direction.
So would something can we give it would something be, for example, like my mom won't take a shower, or my mom won't go to adult daycare? That's the kind of thing that someone having that issue could call and do a one-on-one session. And what would be some possible plans for a situation like that?
Well, those were great examples. I just did one yesterday with someone here on Maui, that the person with dementia is still wanting to go to all of their appointments on their own. They don't want anybody in the appointment with them. And they're in that point in the transition or the progression of the disease where that's just not a great idea anymore, because they're not remembering all the things that they need to tell the doctor. And then when they leave the doctor's office, they're not remembering all the things that the doctor said. And so, so we talk through kind of ways that this adult child could start to work around. And a lot of times it works. The approach that we really suggest a lot is partnership and with the person that has dementia, because you know what? They still are a person. They still have their preferences. They still want their independence. And, they want all the things that we want. It's just that they've got this cognitive loss that's happening that makes all of that a bit more challenging. And so finding ways that you can partner and come alongside the person. We have a program called the Empowered Caregiver, and one of the classes in that is supporting independence. And I kind of liken it to the Goldilocks approach. You have to be able to figure out when this disease is always a moving target, with the idea that it is a neurodegenerative disease that is causing a consistent decline in the person's cognitive abilities. But so it's a moving target. You're not really exactly sure of what they will be able to do 1 month compared to the next. And so being able to find that right amount of independence and support is really important. If you are doing too much for them, well, then a lot of times they just give up because they don't feel like they have the opportunity to be independent. And
or they complain. I do hear, I like the
complain.
idea of the partnership, because I do have clients with cognitive decline who resent being treated like children by their children. And I know that the children are super frustrated. It's really challenging, but that partnership idea, I mean, I'm sure it's difficult to pull
It
off
is
every
difficult.
single day, but
It is.
that sounds like a good goal to be
It's a great overarching kind of goal. In the day-to-day, it can be extremely frustrating. I will tell you,
Sure.
I lost my mom to Lewy body dementia last July, and then my father-in-law just passed away a couple months ago from vascular dementia. So our family has been dealing with this firsthand for the last several years. And both of our parents were feisty and very, just hell bent to have their independence at all costs, and both very stubborn. And so that partnership a lot of times just feels like you're butting heads, but
It feels combative.
it does feel combative. And exactly what you mentioned, that role of, especially when you're a caregiving child, that person is always going to see themselves as your parent. And, I brought you into this world, and there's a lot of that mentality of, you don't tell me what to do, I'm your parent. And so figuring out ways to approach that partnership are going to be unique and different to each person, and that's going to look different for each family. But I think one of the things that one of the other strategies that I talk about a lot when I talk about partnership is recognizing some of the things that we see commonly as the disease progresses. And one of the biggest ones is, as the disease progresses, facts become far less important, because very often they aren't dealing in fact, they aren't dealing in reality in a lot of their thought. And it becomes much more about feelings. And so if you can kind of step away from all the facts that when you're dealing with a certain issue, and instead you try and relate to the feelings that are involved with that. For an example, this is an extreme example, but it's one that I dealt with when my mom was in the hospital at one point. She started having a lot of delusions and a lot of hallucinations. And one of the biggest ones she had was, she thought that there was a man with a machete in the closet. Horrifying, right?
Oh my
But
gosh.
totally not real, but it was
That's
horrifying
so
to her.
scary. That's so
Yes.
scary.
And so when I could have just been like, Mom, there is not anybody, opening the closet. There's nobody in here, like
Or
doing
like,
all of those
does
things.
she need medication?
Yes, like
Yeah.
all the factual parts of that. When I took those out, and I just was like, my gosh, Mom, that sounds really scary. I'm going to talk to the nurses, and I'm going to let them know that they need to check the closet before you go to bed at night. I'll see if maybe we can get a lock on the closet. I just said some things that just reassured her that I was hearing what was scary to her, and I wanted to address it. And I kept doing that for a couple of days, and it went away. And I find that a lot of caregivers say this, that, as soon as I just stopped dealing with all of the facts of the situation and just stopped and thought about how this makes them feel and approached a situation from that, it alleviated the behavior, it alleviated the anxiety that was associated with, whatever it was.
Because she felt heard.
She felt heard. Yeah.
Wow.
And so I think that that's probably one of the biggest bits of advice that I give people, is when they have that feeling of just feeling like, I can't do this, I'm just constantly battling with this person, that you say, try this approach. Just try it for a few days, see if you notice any different. And almost inevitably people come back and say, that helped. It helped a lot.
That's such a great idea. And I think, like with most kids, it comes from a good place of very, very great concern for their parent. It just sometimes like comes out of their mouth as like, you need to move in with me, and this is what is happening. And mom is like, I am not moving to the mainland,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, especially when it's a parent that you've known that person ever since you were born, their characteristics, what their ability level is, their talents and all of these things. And as those things start being affected by Alzheimer's and dementia, it's really hard because you don't have any other point of relativity as a kid to know, and for me, a lot of times I would be like, is she faking it? Like, like I know she knows this, and
Right.
I know that she can do this. And you just as a caregiver, you constantly find yourself kind of questioning what am I seeing in this person? Because I know that they can do this. But another thing that I try and remind our caregivers of all the time, especially our family caregivers, not our paid caregivers, is this person has neurons inside their brain that are dying. That is what this disease is. There's neuron cell death that's happening.
Mhm.
And as those cells die in different parts of the brain, the area that, your temporal lobe, once we start having loss in temporal lobe, we start losing skills with maybe our communication, and
And
once those cells,
it's different for each person. And so it doesn't always express in the same way. I had a friend whose mom was lovely and kind. This papaya is so wonderful. Thank you for bringing it to me. And then I also have a friend who's normally historically very sweet mother has gotten a little like snappy and angry at times. And is that just because those two people had different neurons dying?
potentially, yes. I mean, there are certain areas of the brain that we do see more impacted early on. The
Mhm.
hippocampus is one of those areas. There are certain areas that we do expect to see more, neuron death in atrophy of that part of the brain earlier on, but it is different in each person. And, we then have to kind of broaden the idea of dementia versus Alzheimer's. And, a lot of times I get the question of, what is the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's? And dementia is a big umbrella term that refers to any of a number of neurocognitive disorders that affect behavior, thinking, memory, cognition, and Alzheimer's
Like the Lewy body dementia
like the
that you
Lewy body.
mentioned. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So Alzheimer's is just one form of dementia. And really, we know that there are over 100 different types of dementia now. The four leading causes of dementia are Alzheimer's, which is anything you normally see in publication is that it's anywhere between 60 and 80% of most cases. So I think that's why most people get Alzheimer's and dementia kind of confused, is because it is probably the leading type of dementia. And then the other four are Lewy body, like I mentioned, vascular dementia, which is usually associated with head injury or stroke or a number of TIAs, any of those kinds of vascular problems in the brain. And then the last one is frontotemporal dementia, which we tend to see happen more often in men and younger men. The actor Bruce Willis is somebody that has that now, and his wife is raising a lot of awareness about frontotemporal dementia.
And I
So,
think one of the things that's particularly tricky about that one, where it's a younger man, that I've heard from clients is that this person is still big and physically healthy, and the spouse cannot care physically for them any longer. And the person I'm thinking of had a difficult time finding care for him.
yes, that I would agree with you. Families that I meet that are dealing with FTD, I just sympathize with their situation, because you're exactly right. It very often happens in big, strong, healthy guys that,
Mhm.
and now their frontal lobe, which is where, like our impulse control, and,
Oh,
and our temporal lobe, which has that communication. So a lot of times it's just, just like no thought, just things come out. They do very impulsive things. There's very little safety awareness. You can see that it would just be a huge recipe for disaster,
yes.
for safety and health. And so that is a tough one. But what I was going to say earlier is that, each one of these diseases has a little bit different of a presentation. And so you also see different kind of symptoms and physiology that's happening, biology that's happening in the brain brain with each specific disease. And so that also can kind of indicate, especially when doctors are starting to try and do a diagnosis, they do look at that evaluation and that family interview kind of about what symptoms they are seeing, because that at times can really help to narrow the focus on what type of dementia they might think that they're dealing with.
Would you be able to tell us some of those like early warning signs that families should be aware of? People all the time in my office, I have to ask them when I'm making their estate plan, who would you want to decide if you're incapacitated? And a lot of times people are joking, like, my kids think I'm already incapacitated. They're totally not. But like, what should families be looking for? And like, at what stage is it appropriate for them to encourage their loved one to go to the doctor?
Yeah. Okay, so the Alzheimer's Association has a great class that we teach. I've got a education volunteer over on Maui that actually helps us with teaching this class. It's called the 10 Warning Signs of Alzheimer's.
Great.
We actually have it coming up in various libraries around Maui this coming year in 2026. So you can get on our website, alz.org/Hawaii, and go to our education link, and it will tell you where upcoming classes are. But really, yeah, the program talks a lot about 10 warning signs. The biggest part of it being, when you're looking at these, you want to see if this is something, if this warning sign is impacting daily life. Once daily life is being affected by some of these changes, that's when it's time to mention. And frontline, first thing that you should always do is have a conversation with your primary care doctor. That's where all of this starts, because until you let the primary care doctor know that there are some concerns, you can't really start the whole evaluation and assessment process. So we've got these great little cards. Oops, I don't know if you can see it, that have they're like little bookmarks that have the 10 warning signs. I will read these off to you. Okay.
Yep.
The first one is memory loss that disrupts daily life. And when we talk about memory loss that disrupts daily life, we're talking more about that short-term memory. We're talking about, did I eat breakfast this morning? Did I take my pills yesterday? Okay. So, both of those things could impact your daily life. If you're forgetting to take meds, if you're forgetting doctor's appointments, those kinds of things. Number 2 is challenges in planning or solving problems. And that's more about that executive functioning. All right. Executive functioning means kind of the idea of being able to get from point A to point B. And the example that I always like to give is chocolate chip cookies, because I love chocolate chip cookies. And if I wake up in the morning and say, I want to make chocolate chip cookies today, it's everything that's involved from me saying, I want to make chocolate chip cookies, until the chocolate chip cookie goes in my mouth. And if you stop and think about it, if you're a young, healthy 30-year-old, you just know how to go and make chocolate chip cookies. But as we age, all those steps become a little bit harder to remember or to think through. If I've pulled out the recipe and now all of a sudden I realize that I only have 1 egg and I need 2 eggs, how am I going to problem solve through that? Am I going to go over the neighbors to borrow an egg, but then on my way out, I notice there's a bunch of weeds in the front yard, and now I'm going to start pulling those weeds, and then I get completely sidetracked and I completely forgot about the cookies. So
and the butter's melted on the counter.
Exactly. Those are the kinds of things that we start to see more, is that maybe there's just all of these half-done projects. Maybe the mail is piling up because they're struggling with seeing a task through from beginning to end without either getting sidetracked or just forgetting what it was that they were doing. So that's number 2. Number 3 is difficulty completing familiar tasks. That's more like things like forgetting how to do a recipe you've done forever, like my chocolate chip cookies. If all of a sudden I can't remember how to do that, or bill paying is another one we frequently see, is people are either, and that one can be one of 2 things. They're forgetting to pay the bills, or maybe they've got that pile of bills and they've already paid them, but they forgot to put them away, and they're really good about their bills. So then they come back 3 days later and they go, oh, bills are here. And then they pay it again. And so you might find that mom has paid the electric bill 3 times this month. So that's another sign. And number 4 is,
I see a lot of mom didn't pay the taxes for several years.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that because if you stop and think about that, that's that one before that as well. There's a lot of steps that
Yes.
are involved
Yes,
with
for
getting your
sure.
taxes, all of that stuff put together, getting everything to your accountant, whatever. There's a lot involved with that. And so a lot of times people just get sidetracked along the way, then they forget about it. Number 4 is confusion with time or place. And that's what we start seeing people maybe getting disoriented. Maybe they're getting
Yes.
turned around when they go to the grocery store halfway there. They can't remember exactly where they were going. Or with my father-in-law, we would prep him and prep him and prep him. We're going to this party on Tuesday. And then we would get there and he would be like, what am I here for? He didn't understand why he was there, no matter how much preparation had been done in advance.
Mhm.
Trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. A lot of people don't realize that there's real visual impact with Alzheimer's disease. And as the disease progresses, the visual field narrows pretty dramatically. There's a group of caregiving professionals that do this whole program about how the visual field changes. And they say that by the moderate stages of the disease, people are like looking at the world through like a scuba mask.
Oh,
And at
wow.
the end stages, it's more like goggles. Okay. So you can.
Is the spatial issue also why they'll test by drawing the clock? Is that
Yes,
related to the visual spatial?
that is one of those things. Yes.
Yeah.
And we see changes in depth perception. We see
Yeah.
changes in the ability to visualize contrast. And
Because
so,
I've
if,
seen the numbers not on the circle at all. There's the
oh,
circle and the
yes.
numbers are totally not on it. Yeah.
I have seen some amazing clocks over the
Yeah.
years that families
Yeah.
have shared with me that their parent or that the individual has done at the doctor's office. What I was going to say is we noticed that like if you've got a long wall with several doors and the entire wall is white, they stop being able to recognize that there's a door there because they just can't
Oh,
see
wow.
that contrast. So there are some visual changes that do happen. So, and that's another one that we see early on a lot of times is, everybody I know struggles with the driving issue. When do we need to have mom
Yes.
stop driving?
Can I
When is
just
it
go back?
safe?
Can I just go
Yeah.
back to the door for a second?
Yeah.
That seems like that could be a straightforward early intervention that you
Yes,
folks might recommend. You just paint the door red or black or
exactly.
something.
Yes.
It reminds me of infants, right? So the high contrast works much better with a baby too.
Yes.
So
And
that seems like an easy, like out of all the interventions, painting the door seems very manageable.
exactly. Yes. And
Yeah.
you will frequently see that in nursing care facilities is that they make sure that their doors are all different colors. So
Yes.
yes, that is one of the very easy kind of strategies that people can do. Another
I
one
want to
that
hear, I want to hear about driving too. I know
Oh,
that's
okay.
really
I
important.
was
Yeah.
going to say on the other side of that, we have found families that if maybe the person is eloping and they're trying to keep them from going out that door,
So again,
they,
can you just say what eloping is?
it-
It's not getting
sorry,
married, but that also
sorry.
happens sometimes. The getting married we've had happen a couple times, but this
If
eloping is.
eloping is kind of escaping, leaving where they are supposed to be, kind of either sneaking off or running off, but leaving where they are expected to be at. But we have people that put different kinds of things in front of a door that maybe look like people put like a black rug so that it gives them the visual of thinking that it's a hole. There are all different
Oh
kinds of
my
things that you
goodness.
can do. Yes, I know families have come up with kind of crazy strategies of putting things in front of the door that makes the person not want to go near the door.
Oh my
So
gosh.
again, it's a lot of tips, tricks, things like that families come up with in order to keep the person safe and healthy,
And I think that would be the value in one of those one-on-one consultations with someone
Yes.
from the Alzheimer's Association is that you have the expertise. Usually the person going through it has never done this before. And then you can say, maybe try painting the door or maybe try putting a black rug in front of the door. Just those practical ideas that someone could try to implement. So every person isn't reinventing it from scratch every time when there is a bunch of collective knowledge about this disease.
Yes. And the sidetrack, there's a couple of people on social media now that are doing this that have just great, I can give you a list of people that if you want to include that,
Okay.
that I really have enjoyed their very practical tips that they have and
Right.
implement them whenever I can. Okay, driving.
Yeah.
Driving is a tough one. I have a lecture series on Kauaʻi, and we have started it. We partner with AARP, and I basically just have a dementia topic each month, and we try and find a local expert that will come in and talk about it. And in the last couple of months, we've been able to get a volunteer who knows tech, and so we've started making those available to our folks on Maui County so that they can join in on those. But we did have one of our primary, no, he's actually a geriatrician here on Kauaʻi that was willing to broach the topic of driving because nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to address it because it's a really hard topic and there's so much liability around it.
And it's, I think on the outer islands, on Kauai, on Maui, like it's trickier when you can't drive because I mean we do have the MEO bus, but it's not super easy to get around on outer islands if you can't drive. So like even compared to Honolulu or the mainland, taking away the license and not being able to drive is a massive threat to somebody's independence.
Independence, yeah, for sure. My mother, until the day she died, completely resented my sister and I for taking away her driver's license. It was her last kind of grip on independence, and so it's a really big issue. Going back to that visual field loss that I talk about, what is currently said is that in the early stages of the disease, there is about a 50% visual field loss. So if you do your visual field right now and you kind of check out where your peripheral is, how far out you can, if you take that and divide it in half, I can tell you that mine is outside of my rearview mirrors right now. So now I've lost that visual field. I'm having to really move to even be able to see my rearview mirror.
Yeah.
My reaction time is slower. I've got that spatial, that am I judging where the car is in front of me correctly? And if they come to a quick halt, do I have enough reaction time? Typically one of our early warning signs is that there will be some little dents or nicks in cars that,
I mean, hopefully that's all it is.
hopefully that is all it is. You are exactly right. And,
Yeah.
that they don't remember where they came from or how they got there. So
I also hear a lot that they can't find where they parked the car
Yes.
afterward.
That's a very common one.
Yeah.
Yes. I had a guy that worked at a mall and he said the number of older people that he had to help find their cars was a weekly thing. There are certain states that do have restrictions, and there are and then there are every state manages it differently. There are states that as soon as a diagnosis of Alzheimer's is made, their license is pulled automatically.
Wow.
And, I would say the benefit of that is to the family because
Yes.
they don't have to be the bad guy.
I definitely have clients who would have really appreciated either the auto pulling or more frequent testing, having
Yes.
driver's testing and
Yes.
not having to be the bad guy. And it sounds like maybe that would have helped you too.
Yes, it would have. It would
Yeah.
have. I agree. I think that we don't do enough testing on our kūpuna period with driving. I feel like that there should be, and in fact, I don't even really know exactly what it is, but I would love to see an annual or every other year driving test once you get past the age of 65 or 70, just to make sure that skills are still appropriate and safe for being on the roads.
And I think that would allow you to maintain a partnership with your loved one. Like the two of you could be partners in complaining about the state of Hawaii for taking away your driver's license.
And
it wouldn't be against each other.
Exactly. It's one of my favorite caregiver strategies is the blame game. Find somebody else you can blame so that you don't have to be the person, because then it makes it so much easier,
Yeah.
My mom, when she was in rehab, she just kept going, when do I get to go home? And she'd ask 100 times a day. But my mom loved her primary care doctor. And so I would say, you know what? Dr. Schultz has said that he's not ready for you to go home. He wants you to get stronger. As soon as I would say Dr. Schultz's name, she was just like, okay, because she loved Dr. Schultz. And it took all of the bad guy off of me, and it made it really easy. So now, obviously, you can't like blame your sister when your sister's going to be coming in the house the next day. But like if there are easy scapegoats that don't mind taking it, and we do have doctors here that will say, in fact, the gal that I was talking with yesterday told me that their doctor, they had the exact same situation, and the last time they went in, the mom was complaining about not being able to drive, and he said, that was me. I was the one who said that you should not be driving anymore. I put it in your record, and so if you have a doctor that's willing to say that, I think that's helpful, so that it doesn't have to be the family members. The other side of that,
it's my fault. It's my fault. We're not letting you do that amendment. It was me who said we couldn't do that amendment to your trust. Yeah,
exactly. And then we have the other side of extremes where the person is going to drive no matter what. It's completely unsafe. And so then we start talking about strategies for how to deal with that. Do we pull the spark plug? And then the car won't start. And then, especially on
do we call the police? Do we call the police?
Do we call the police to have them follow them? Just say, hey, my mom just left and she's on, this road headed thinking she's going to this place. There are those different kinds of things that you can do. We can, we use this strategy on Kauaʻi a lot because, like I have a part that I've been waiting for 4 months for my car, so you can always use that strategy. Mom, your catalytic converter went out there. We're waiting for the part. And then you kind of hope that short-term memory, you can actually maybe use that to your benefit, that maybe she'll stop asking, and sometimes we do see that kind of out of sight, out of mind. If you're able to get the car off the property, that helps as well. But it's a hard issue to deal with for families. So let me go back to finishing the 10 warning signs. I just realized we got sidetracked.
No, I was going to bring you back to it. I wasn't sure what number we were. Are we like on about 6 or so?
We are on number 6. Yes. New problems with words in speaking or in writing. And so we start to see people having trouble with that word recognition, or being able to pull up the right word at the right time. Maybe you see somebody start pointing at things a lot more, or doing the thingamajig, or not being able to come up with a word. We had a caregiver on Kauaʻi whose husband kept saying the light box, and she was just had no idea what he was talking about. Finally made him get up, and he walked over to a lamp, and it's like, okay, well, it's a box, and there's a light. And so, he strung together some other words that helped him to communicate what he was trying to get across. So if you start seeing those kind of just getting hiccups on words, and maybe one of the other things that this is kind of an interesting fact that a lot of people don't know is, as the disease progresses, people lose the ability to read. And that also has to do with that visual processing. When you're reading, you take in that language, it comes up through your eyes, through your optic nerve, goes in, and then goes into another area where our brain processes what all those symbols were and give it meaning. And that's a lot going on in the brain. And when you've got various areas where there's atrophy happening, we lose that ability. And so one of the things that we use early on after diagnosis is a lot of people used kind of written cues or signs, mom, here's how you use the microwave, those kinds of things. And those can be really helpful for a season. But as the disease progresses, they're not going to be able to understand, what that is that's written there. And so that's just something to keep in mind as the disease progresses. Number 7 is misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace steps. And I think this is the one that everybody worries about the most. And this is why most people come to that class is, I've lost my keys 7 times this last month, It's more, as we get older, our memory isn't as good, especially short-term memory. Things get a little bit harder to get back into the permanent filing cabinet in our brain. And so,
or it's harder to get them back out of the filing cabinet.
Exactly.
Retrieving.
I hate that one when you're going, I know this answer. Why can't I bring it up? The bigger problem is if you aren't able to retrace your steps. So if you've lost your keys, and then maybe your husband says, I found your keys, they're in the bathroom. if you can then go, why are my keys in the bathroom? And go, oh,
Oh,
it's because, I was running in, I had to go to the
yeah.
bathroom. I set them down. The bigger red flag is if you're looking at those keys and it just does not come to you.
There's
Why?
just nothing there. Okay, got it.
So that inability to retrace those steps is a big red flag. Number 8 is decreased or poor judgment. And we see that like with the driving, maybe they do have a fender bender and they don't tell anybody about it. Or, my mom just seemed to think that she was completely safe she would pull ladders out all the time. I'm like, goodness gracious, what are you
Did you
doing?
say she would pull ladders out? Oh
Ladders.
my
Yeah. She would be like,
gosh.
oh, I'm going to get up and pull down my Christmas stuff. It's like, that's a 40
Whoa.
pound bin, like, so just not having great judgment. We start to see that. We also see that in in personal grooming. So that's another early warning sign we see is people, maybe you see them in the same outfit 2 or 3 days in a row, or maybe they had always been really aware of their appearance. And now, they're, a guy maybe looking real scruffy or things like that. Those are other early signs, but they also go back to that earlier sign that we talked about that executive processing. And taking a shower is one of the big things I consistently hear from families is that I can't get mom to take a shower. She doesn't want to
Yes.
take a shower. And if you stop and think about it, taking a shower has a ton of steps. There's so
Yeah.
many steps that are involved. And people often think, well, taking a shower is something that I have always gotten up and done in the morning. And if they forgot it that morning, well, then they get to the next day or later in the day and they'll say, no, I took a shower this morning, because that short-term memory is impacted. But the routine that they've done all their life tells them, I took a shower this morning.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how you can kind of start seeing that grooming piece fall apart.
Mhm.
Number 9 is withdrawal from work or social activities. And if you go back and think about a lot of the things we've been talking about where that short-term memory piece is impacted, and maybe you don't remember everybody's name at your small church group, or you can't remember, that time you guys all went on a trip to Vegas together. It For people that are really aware of these things slipping, a lot of times their response is just to pull back and to not go out to those things. And so if your parent
I think we see the same thing with hearing loss too.
hearing loss, totally.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you mentioned hearing loss, because the correlation between hearing loss and dementia now is undeniable.
Yes.
And it's becoming a hot topic for research, that untreated hearing loss is a leading risk factor for developing dementia later in life.
I try to tell all the clients who don't have hearing aids, because hearing aids are expensive, but I try to just tell them that about that correlation with Alzheimer's, just
It's a
to
big
try to
part of rehab,
motivate them or their kids to get them a hearing aid.
for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do think that both of those play hand in hand with that withdrawal and being social, engaging. And then the last one is changes in mood or personality. So typically we see like suspicion come on, because
Yeah.
if the keys are missing and somebody came in and took them, anxiety, depression, fear, all of those things kind of just get a little bit more heightened. And so you might see someone having just like a shorter fuse, or just a little more, like everything's turned up a little bit, turned
Yes.
up a little bit in mood. So those are your 10 warning
Thank you.
signs.
That's
You're
super
welcome.
helpful.
Okay.
I'm wondering, there's like so many things I want to ask you about, but I'm trying to not ask you everything. I think our listeners would be curious to know about any, ongoing or new research, any possibilities of new medications, anything that has been, because Alzheimer's Association is involved with research as well.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
So is
yes.
there
Yeah.
any like hope or new things coming out on the horizon that, could
Yes.
help?
So we have several things. We've got 2 new FDA approved drugs. They are both infusion therapies. The big caveat for them is that they're only available in the early stages of the disease. So that goes
So
back
just,
to
sorry,
what we were talking about.
infusion therapy means you go to the hospital or an infusion center and you get it via IV.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes. And
Okay.
one of these drugs is it once weekly? And then the other one, no, wait, I'm forgetting if it's once week. No, it's once a month. So one of them is every other week, and then the other drug is monthly, I believe.
Okay.
None of them are available currently on Maui. You have to go over to Oahu for that treatment. They are only available in the early stages of the disease, like I mentioned. So that really lends itself to really what the Alzheimer's Association is pushing, is that early assessment, early warning
Yes.
signs, getting a
Yes.
diagnosis early so that you haven't overshot that treatment window.
Yes.
So
And then the
many
goal of
people,
yes, so many people wait too long
they
because
wait until they're in the
yes,
moderate stages. Yeah,
for
to
sure.
die.
So in that early treatment window, the goal would be to sort of forestall the progression for a bit
Exactly. It
longer.
is not a
Okay.
cure. It is not a
Yes.
cure. You know, one of the big parts of of how the disease manifests itself is a buildup of amyloid plaque in the brain. Okay. And these two drugs are amyloid busters. So basically they
Oh,
break up these plaques in the brain. So I think initially everybody was very hopeful that, if we break up the amyloid, will we cure the disease? And we're finding that this isn't a cure, but it slows the progression. If you're looking at like a graph of time and cognitive ability, if somebody is being treated, we're seeing kind of a slower decline. We're still seeing a decline, but it's slower. And if somebody that's not, as time progresses, their cognitive decline is happening at a much faster rate. These drugs have side effects that are definitely important for you to discuss with your doctor. They are expensive. They are covered by Medicare. CMS has approved them as a treatment, but even with that coverage, from what I am hearing, out of pocket is about $24,000 a year. So it is an expensive treatment.
you said it's $24,000 a year after insurance?
After insurance,
Wow.
yes. Yeah, so very expensive. The other really exciting thing that has happened this year is we now have an FDA approved blood test for Alzheimer's. It is not something that is being used where I could walk in as, say, a healthy, 30, 50-year-old and say, I want to be tested for Alzheimer's. The way that it is being used is if there is already an assessment going on, or if there's a suspicion of cognitive decline, they can use that test to confirm the presence of amyloid plaque, and it will allow for what they're calling, and I'm blanking on the word, a legitimate diagnosis of it.
Yeah, would that help? Would that be required for the insurance company to pre-authorize those medications? Okay.
Well, no, not necessarily.
Oh, no.
It could be. That's because it's so new. I think it will probably move to that if you
Okay.
have a positive blood test, you qualify for that. Right now, the gold standard on the mainland for diagnosis is something called an amyloid PET scan. So
Okay.
it is a PET scan of the brain, but it targets that amyloid plaque. And so when the PET scan is done, basically that amyloid lights up. And so that's how
I
you would
see.
get a positive diagnosis.
We only
In
have
Hawaii,
PET scans on Oahu, right?
yes. Well,
Yeah.
no, there are PET scans. I believe there is PET scans on neighbor islands. I'm not sure about that.
Mm.
But the problem is we don't have the amyloid PET
Oh, I
anywhere in
see.
Hawaii.
Okay.
Now, Straub is in the process of getting a contract, and they're saying by next spring we should have an amyloid PET in the state.
Wow. Wow.
But in the meantime, what doctors do is it's a combination of physical assessment or physical exam, blood labs, an MRI, and a spinal tap. And the spinal
Oh,
tap, yes. So in Hawaii, it's a pretty invasive assessment process. And the
wow.
reason being is that I mentioned that amyloid plaque. There's another protein. Amyloid is a protein that our body naturally makes. And for whatever reason, with Alzheimer's, it starts to build up in the brain. So we have another protein that is another key indicator for Alzheimer's, and that is called tau protein. And the tau protein is what shows up in the spinal tap. So when they take that little bit of cerebrospinal fluid, when they look at it under a microscope, they can start to see these little tau buildup, which they call tau tangles. And so that is how we get a confirmed diagnosis in Hawaii currently.
I didn't
But
know that. That's
with
really
that,
invasive.
It's really invasive. And so
Yeah.
now it would be interesting, and I don't know the answer because the blood test just became FDA approved in like July, August. It's been pretty recent. So I'm kind of wondering if doctors will maybe potentially move away from the spinal tap and instead do a combination of the MRI, the, you know, the
And the
labs
blood and the
and
blood
blood
test.
tests. Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be much less invasive, and I think would potentially have more people being willing to do the assessments too.
Okay, this has been a ton of really helpful information. Will you let us know? I know that you have lots of programs. I heard you say you've got the 10 warning signs program. You're doing monthly lectures on Kauai that can now be Zoomed with people on Maui or
Yes.
anywhere, I suppose.
Yes.
What else? And you've got the one-on-one consultations. What other resources do you want to share with everybody?
Okay, we have support groups. We have a virtual support group for family caregivers that may not be able to get out of the house.
Yep.
That is monthly. It's the third Wednesday of every month via Zoom. And I'm hoping that I can just maybe give you my contact information and we can make that to where people can reach out to me and I can tell them how to get registered or signed up for those things.
Yeah, is it okay if you say it now and then I can also put it in the show notes? Is that okay?
For the link to signing up.
Oh, do you want to just give me personally your contact info or do you want to say it on this podcast?
I can say that. Yeah, for
Okay,
sure.
great.
Yeah.
Say it and
Okay.
then I'll put it when we
Good.
post the podcast, I'll put it in the show notes so it'll be in
Yes.
writing
Okay.
too. Okay.
All right. So people can reach out to me and I can help them with getting registered for that Zoom webinar, or not webinar, sorry, that Zoom support group. You can call me at my office, 808-518-6655, or email me at cfowler, it's C-F like Frank, O-W-L-E-R, at
Mhm.
ALZ, like zebra, .org. And I can help them get signed up with that online one. And then we also have an in-person support group that meets every month in Kahului at Rosalani Assisted Living. That group meets the third Thursday of every month, and they meet from 4 until 5:30. And it's a
Great.
great group of people that get together. And it's just a chance to be able to network with others that are kind of going through similar situations. They share resources, they share those tips and tricks. And I found that it's a great way for family members to feel a little bit connected and less alone. The other thing that I wanted to mention is our Empowered Caregiver series that I had mentioned before.
Mhm.
It's a 5 module series, and it's for specifically for family caregivers to kind of go over some of the more difficult parts of caregiving. And typically we've done that as like a cohort and done that in person, but our little Care Bear team is trying something out right now where we're just throwing out a single module as a Zoom webinar and doing
Mhm.
it at different days and times so that we can potentially hit people, if somebody works during the day and they can only do a
Yeah.
class at night. And so we're basically trying to do 3 different modules each month. And I can give you a listing of what we've got going for the rest of the month in December. That's
Great.
as far out as we've scheduled. But that Empowered Caregiver, those 5 modules are, let me see, the foundations of caregiving, responding to dementia-related behaviors, communicating effectively, supporting independence, and then the last one is exploring care and support resources.
Great.
So each one of those we're just kind of trying to throw out into the universe and see if that is helpful for our constituents here in Hawaii.
Great. And then you also have the walk coming up. Can you talk
We
about that?
do,
Yeah.
yes. The Walk to End Alzheimer's is probably it is the Alzheimer's Association's biggest fundraising effort. We have over 600 walks nationwide. And I think it was 2 years ago, we broke the 100 million mark in a single year. So these walks are highly
Oh.
successful.
Do you mean
And
100 million participants?
no, $100 million we raised.
Wow, that's what I was
Yes.
thinking. She doesn't mean dollars. Oh,
No,
wow.
$100 million.
Okay. Wow.
And, and that allows us, you had mentioned earlier about the Alzheimer's Association funding research and treatment and studies and clinical research. Last year we donated $115 million towards clinical research. So this is a big effort for us. We have 4 walks in the state of Hawaii. Maui is our crown jewel at the end of the walk season. So we had our big island walk, Kauaʻi and Oahu's was just this last weekend on Magic Island. And our executive director told us that he thinks that we are going to pass the $1 million mark for the state of Hawaii for walks. So that's a pretty impressive number that we've been able to raise. We've got a great walk committee. They have all kinds of things that they add to the day, but it's a great way to just get out. We ask people to wear their purple. We have these, I should have had one with me. We have these great kind of trademark walk flowers, and we give a walk flower to each person that comes out and walks. We have 4 colors: purple, yellow, blue, and orange. An orange flower represents that you aren't affected by the disease, but you just back the cause. A yellow represents that you're a caregiver for someone with Alzheimer's or dementia. Blue is someone that is living with the disease, and purple is someone who has lost someone to the disease. So I hate how many purple flowers we have currently at our walks. Really hope that we can get more towards what we have, which we only have one of at every walk, which is the white flower. We have one symbolic white flower, and that's representative of the first person that's cured of Alzheimer's. And so I am hoping that one day we won't even really need to have this walk, or we'll just all be walking with white flowers and celebrating our brain health.
That's lovely. So how does someone sign up for that?
So the website to join is alz.org and then /Maui Walk.
Awesome. That's great that you're doing it. And I really appreciate you coming on. You are a wealth of information. I learned a lot interviewing you too.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. I'm so glad.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Take care.
Okay. You too. Bye.
Great. Bye.